All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful Wednesday. Happy Mental Health Awareness Month. I'm excited to be here leading this program with you all this morning and learning together about good mental health in the workplace from NAMI, Minnesota. We've got a great program lined up for you this morning, so let's get to it. First things first, my name is Frances Huntley. I am the Strategic Partnership Program Manager at the Minneapolis Regional Chamber, and I lead the MSP Wellness Program, which I'll talk about in just a moment. And I have with me today Catherine Christensen from NAMI, Minnesota, who I will fully introduce in just a few moments. Today we'll talk for just a moment about the MSP Wellness Initiative and the ways you can get involved. We'll hear Catherine's presentation after that, which will have lots of practical information and tangible tips, and then we'll leave some time for questions and a quick survey at the end. So for those of you who may be new to us, MSP Wellness is a partnership between the Minneapolis Regional Chamber, the Hennepin County and Minneapolis Health Departments, and health partners. We're all working together to provide tools, resources, and programming for employers to help them support employee wellness and cultivate a culture of health and well-being in the workplace. I'm going to touch on a few programs we offer within the MSP Wellness Initiative. The first is the Minneapolis Microgrant Program, where we work with the city to administer grants from the Minnesota Statewide Health Improvement Program, also known as SHIP, to businesses in Minneapolis to implement projects focused on changing workplace policies, systems, and environments to support employee wellness. And these microgrants are really designed to be a catalyst for organizations who are just starting on their wellness journey. So here's a group of organizations we are working with this year who have received MSP Wellness microgrants. We have 12 of them who are doing really great work to support their employees. They are creating wellness rooms at their work sites, lactation spaces for breast and chest feeding employees, programs to support healthy eating, and more. And then we have the MSP Wellness Champion Designation Program, which is actually launching next week. So after this program, everyone should bookmark mspwellness.com and go apply next Thursday, June 1st, to be an MSP Wellness Champion. MSP Wellness Champions are any Minnesota organization with at least 10 employees who are implementing worksite wellness programs and meet the criteria outlined in the application. All you have to do is fill out the online application by September 30th, so quite a bit of time. And if your application is approved, you'll be celebrated at our celebration event in November, and you'll also have several promotional opportunities through this MSP Wellness Network to really be recognized across the community as a business or organization who's doing this work and really investing in employees. And lastly, we have health partners, and the Living Well program is a really great partner in all of the work that we do. We encourage everyone to go check out the Living Well program, which is a tool that they offer outside of their insurance program, which is a customizable portal with all kinds of tools for employees that are designed to really lower health risks and give them the tools to create sustained behavioral changes in their lives. I, for one, love using this program as a chamber employee, and I can't say enough great things about how great the tools are. So encourage everyone to check out mspwellness.com/livingwell. That's living-well, or just reach out to me to learn more. So that is enough from me. Let's get to why you're all here, and that is to hear about mental health in the workplace from Catherine Christensen. So without further ado, I will introduce her and let her take it away. Catherine is the Employer Education Coordinator at NAMI, Minnesota. Catherine provides mental health education to employers, supporting employees' mental health and well-being. Catherine's background includes corporate and nonprofit organizational support and training in the areas of substance misuse and health and well-being for adults, children, and families. Catherine holds a BS from Michigan State University, focusing on business and sociology. And Catherine's passionate about her work because of a family member living with a mental illness. So Catherine, thank you so much for being here. I'll stop sharing my slides and turn it over to you. We'll do a little transition here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I always laugh when I see that picture because that was pre-COVID and my hair is so much longer. So I really need to get an updated picture. So good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be here with you during May Mental Illness Awareness Month. And I was just telling Francis and Amy earlier, National NAMI is here for the National Convention starting today if you're interested at the Minneapolis Convention Center. So what do we do? Why might you be interested? Well, I'm with NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And what we do here at NAMI is provide education, support, and advocacy for individuals living with a mental illness and their families, or as I like to say, those that love them. All of us here at NAMI have lived experience, meaning we either live with a mental illness or we have a family member with a mental illness. And our younger son, who's 22 now, lives with major depressive disorder. So all of us here bring passion, compassion, and empathy, and a lot of belief in supporting individuals with a mental illness. A quick little piece of trivia, if you can't remember NAMI or NAMI, you can remember the NAMI mommies. We were started over 40 years ago by a group of parents around a kitchen table that wanted to support their family members. And as I mentioned, that's what we do here. We're the state chapter. There's one in every state. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, we're going to look at good mental health in the workplace, 5 things you can do. I love all the resources that you have available through MSP. So really encourage you to continue to stay involved with that group. So what we're going to look at today is promoting good mental health, learning some common symptoms of mental illnesses. Excuse me, love this time of year, not so much the allergies. So excuse me if I get a little groggy there or crackly. We want to talk about changing our attitudes towards people living with a mental illness. We're going to talk about accommodations a little bit, and then we're going to talk about creating a place that fosters respect and acceptance. At the beginning of all my presentations, I like to just take a moment for us to come together. Speaking of creating a space that fosters respect and acceptance, I want us to all realize that we bring different biases and experiences to this space, and this is a safe and respectful environment. This is a favorite spot in Ely. Haven't been there in a way many years, too long, but I'd like you to just look at this picture or close your eyes, but put aside those to-do lists, emails that need to be answered. Take this next hour for you and for building your mentally healthy workplace. So with that in mind, we're going to take 2 deep breaths. We're going to inhale for 4 and exhale for 6. So inhale for 4 and exhale for 6. Inhale for 4, exhale for 6. Thank you. That's just a moment of mindfulness, helps me get centered to be with all of you. We always want to exhale more than we inhale, move that stale energy. If you're having a really bad day, you can growl out your exhale, nothing else. It will make you laugh. And we need some laughter because look at this statistic or this comment from Workplace Institute at UKG. It's a multinational technology organization out in California and Florida. But what they found, this was published in February, managers impact our mental health more than doctors, therapists, and the same as spouses. And it's 69% of managers and spouses impact our mental health versus 51 and 40 for therapists. So as you can imagine, it's important to utilize the gifts and talents of all our employees. We want to have productive employees who carry out the mission of our organization. We want to have a culture that accepts differences and helps everyone to do their best. And we want to treat mental illnesses like physical health conditions. You'll hear me repeat this, that we all have mental health, we all have physical health. And mental health, as I said here, is the same as any other illness, like any other physical illness. And it's important to note that recovery is possible. As I mentioned earlier, our son has major depressive disorder. It's a lifelong illness, but it's or chronic, but he's in recovery. So recovery is possible. He's doing great right now. It's so awesome. So what do mental illnesses look like in the workplace? Well, an employee may have a mental illness. There may be a family member with a mental illness. The manager or executive may have a mental illness or a family member with a mental illness. Or the people that you're front facing with may have a mental illness. I do want to say just some housekeeping details. You will get handouts on all this information after class. I'm going to ask y'all to do an evaluation at the end, and please feel free to ask questions in the chat. I'm monitoring it as well as Amy if I miss something. So where are we now? 70% of people with depression are in the workforce. It takes on average adults 11 years to get treatment. And 70% of us are here with depression in the workforce, or 70% of people. 35 million lost work days per year due to mental illnesses. So those are some pretty big numbers. Barely 57% of people living with a mental illness were getting treatment, and that has resulted in $105 billion of costs due to untreated mental illnesses, and that's mostly due to lost productivity. 1 in 10 full-time employees have an addiction. People with ADHD, which is considered a mental illness, are 18 times as likely to be disciplined. Depression is the leading cause of short and long-term disability, and those that are in the manufacturing sector, people with untreated mental illnesses are 4.5 times more likely than others to experience an accident or a near miss in the preceding 28 days. That's not specific to the manufacturing industry. What I wanted to say is that can be more important in those industries that have more hands-on, perhaps riskier, jobs where you're working with machinery, et cetera. So you can see, if you think of all those numbers, there are big benefits to treating mental illnesses and looking at these 5 things that we can do. There will be a reduction in sick days and in turnover, improved productivity, more engagement, and increased loyalty. Think about some space, and hopefully it's where you work, where you feel really supported. You really want to do your best, and you want to work harder, and you want to stay loyal to that organization. We talked about those numbers of lost productivity due to sick days and the $105 billion cost. So there'll be a reduction in your healthcare costs, increased satisfaction, and then, as I mentioned earlier, with those accidents, there'll be increased safety with fewer accidents. So what do we want to do first? We want to promote mental health. So what does that look like? It's important to note that we all have mental health. And some days we have good days and some days we have bad days. So I want you to think about your morning. Did you wake up before the alarm went off? You had a great night's sleep. Your coffee, tea, smoothie was delicious. If you drove to work, no traffic, which is unheard of nowadays in this state. Or you sat down to your computer and all the technology came on. So that was a great mental health day. We'll call that a blue day. Now think about a day where perhaps you overslept. Either you were sick, or partner, spouse, kid, pet was sick, got sick on the furniture, you're up all night with them, you're just kind of fried when you wake up, then your coffee, tea, smoothie spilled on your shirt, then you got in the car, if you were driving to work, you were stuck in traffic, or you sat down to your computer and the technology wasn't working, Zoom kept crashing. We're a little frazzled, right? That's a red day. So I set that up to just illustrate that we all have mental health. And the World Health Organization defines mental health as a state of well-being in which an individual realizes their own abilities. We can cope with the normal stresses of everyday life, because life is bumpy, right? And we can work productively and fruitfully, and we're able to make a contribution to our community. Health and mental health go together, and everyone has health, physical health, and mental health. And now we're living in this time frame. It's great we're in the endemic phase, but we're really dealing with the burnout from the last couple of years. There's so much fatigue. There's scarcity, not only in supply chains, staffing. If you go to the grocery store, there's always empty shelves, but there's also scarcity in our bandwidth, meaning we don't really have that extra energy to power through. You may have heard of surge capacity, and that's the normal response to being able to dig deep and power through stressful situations. Well, we're all getting a little fatigued. And I love this term. It came across my desk in the fall. Mayo has coined pandemic anger as being panger or pangry. People are just short-fused right now. And we don't really have this new normal. It's the next normal, because things keep changing, and we've got high prices. There's violence. So this creates a roller coaster of change and emotions. And what that does is create stress. And stress is a normal reaction. Some stress can be good. Acute stress gives us time to swerve away from that car if it's coming at us, or moving your hand when something's hot, or getting prepared for a presentation. Our bodies are hardwired for 20 to 30 minutes of that. The cortisol is released, but we also want to make sure it's released from our bodies. If you think of a nature channel where a gazelle is being chased by a lion and the gazelle gets away, After that, it shakes tip to tail, and it has completed the stress cycle and gotten rid of that extra cortisol that has built up in their bodies. If we don't get rid of that cortisol, and when stress lasts a long time, that results in chronic stress, and that can harm our health. You may have heard of eustress. It's a new term that's going around, but that's the type of stress that you feel when you're excited. You're getting ready to go out or go on a date or something fun. That's also a form of acute stress, but it's good stress. Chronic stress, not so much, because that can impact our mental health through depression, anxiety, mood swings, and irritability. Excuse me. And it can also impact our physical health through headaches, stomach aches, sleeplessness, maybe just, angry or so low energy, or it can lead to diabetes, heart disease, and high blood pressure. I was going to go into more physical symptoms there and then realized, well, I didn't need to. So what do we do? It's not all doom and gloom. I do like to point that out, but it's really important to promote mental health. And that starts with taking care of ourselves. And self-care it comes from a dominant culture, but it's not really just a dominant culture activity. If you think of the fact that you go to the doctor maybe a couple times a year, 2 or 3 times a year, that results in maybe 2 hours front facing with a clinician. That leaves 8,800 hours in the rest of the year for you to take care of yourself and really creating the foundation of self-care. Just checking the time here. So what does that look like? Make a decision when you're on and when you're off. We used to talk about work-life balance, where we assigned X amount of time to personal and professional. But at NAMI, we like to talk about work-life harmony. How can we combine our work life and our personal life so it's more harmonious? And especially nowadays, where, welcome to my home, we are working from our homes a lot, and the lines have been blurred. Manage expectations. How are you measuring up to your own and others? Are they realistic? Figure out when you work best, morning or afternoon. Can you structure your day around this? I'm a morning person. I'm sending emails at 6 a.m. I have a colleague that's sending them at 11. I thought it was really interesting. I received an email from someone that said, this is a great time for me to be working. Please feel free to respond when it works for you. So I thought that was a great tip, and that's a great way we can lead by example also. And what do you do well, and how can you build on that? When we focus on what's of value and what we do well, we are utilizing our strengths, which are given to us. So we really want to focus on what we do well and build it on it. And then we can collaborate with others that might be stronger in areas where we aren't. And that also creates a more harmonious work situation. So address stress. Can you have walking meetings? Can you do 10-minute meditation breaks during the day? If you Google desk yoga, you will get so many PDFs, and you can sit right at your chair and do some movement and move however you are able. Listen to work or listen to music to help you stay focused and block out noise. It's recommended, and I before I go a little further here, I'd like you to just think about exercise, nutrition, and sleep being the foundations of your self-care. Incredibly important to move our bodies however we are able. It's recommended that adults get 30 to 60 minutes a day, 3 to 5 times per week. You can break it up into 10 little bursts of energy or activity, 3 times a day or 10 times a day if you're feeling really motivated. You want to eat from the rainbow. 95% of our serotonin is produced in our gut, which is our mood regulating hormone. So wherever you can have nutritious snacks and meals available. Important to note, not everyone has access to nutritious food. So be aware of that when you're working with your teams. Sleep is the most important out of exercise and nutrition. It affects our cognitive functioning, our optimal physical functioning. So keep those routines. It's recommended that adults get 7 to 9 hours per night. Life is bumpy. There are going to be those sleepless nights, but if you're getting 5 hours or less for an extended period of time, use 2 weeks as your benchmark. You might want to check your sleep hygiene. Make sure you're staying hydrated and take breaks throughout the day. I do classes just on this, so I'm trying not to give too much information here. We are cyborgs, right? These are attached to us, even if we think they aren't. So try to manage your technology. Don't let it manage you. Block off times to do emails. Set up apps that can help you stay focused on not going down those rabbit holes. Consider no emails after 6 p.m. Think about mental health days for you or your teams. Just take time off to relieve stress. Remember, we all have mental health, we all have physical health. And conflict resolution, learn how to deal with conflict. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. Practice that time management, as I mentioned earlier. There's a great activity called a brain dump activity. At the beginning of the day, you just take 2 minutes and you write down everything that needs to be done. Doesn't have to be neat and tidy. You just throw it on a piece of paper. It can be your work, your personal. But what you can do then is really prioritize those tasks at hand, and it helps us stay focused, and it helps us not get stuck in the weeds or get overwhelmed with everything that needs to be done, and stay connected to others. The Surgeon General just released 2 weeks ago now an epidemic of isolation and belonging. So make sure you're really connecting to people, because we did get away from that the last couple of years. All these tips will be on the handout. I am talking fast, so you won't miss anything. Questions or comments as I go along here? Mindfulness and meditation, we did a moment of that where we took a deep breath. Great way to just pause, because there's always a stimulus and a response, right? We want to give ourselves a little bit of time between that stimulus and response. So we stay up here in our prefrontal cortex versus reacting from our emotional, fear-based amygdala. So when we take a breath, it helps us stay up here in our rational part of our brain. I love that you were talking about doing mini grants or micro grants for quiet rooms. They're a great spot for people to just go and take a moment. Aromatherapy can be really powerful. And then if you're doing all of these things and you're not feeling great, seek treatment, get help, know what resources are available to you. Use your support system to help you reduce your stress. If you're comfortable, tell your manager you're struggling, because we'll talk about stigma in a little bit here. But in one of your handouts is your workplace mentally healthy? And that's a little 8-question quiz, we call it. It's just something for you to do internally to see where you are. So as you look at that quiz, and some thoughts to consider are, what do we need in the workplace to be able to care for ourselves, each other, and our members, our teams? And how does your workplace make it easier and harder to care for your mental health? So think about that as you're working through your wellness programs. So promote that good mental health. We're taking care of ourselves, we're leading by example, but encourage people to take vacations and breaks. Promote your EAP resources, your employee assistance programs. Those are only accessed 12% of the time on average nationally. They're incredible free resources, confidential, 24/7, and it's separate from the medical benefits. So it's a great in the moment resource for people. Promote self-care tools, incorporate well-being activities. You know, May is Mental Illness Awareness Month. Don't make it a one and done. Start maybe Mindfulness Mondays or Wednesday Wellness. There's a lot of national themes you can tie into for wellness. June is Pride Month. July is Minority Mental Health Month. August is Wellness Month. September is Suicide Prevention. October 10th is World Mental Health Day. So incorporate those well-being activities. Reward and recognize, especially for well-meaning, and make sure, or for well-being, and make sure that we're providing manager training as well, because we can't do all this if people don't have the tools to do that. So start the conversation, provide those trainings. You can have this class come into your organization also. So what does that look like? So we're going to promote all this good mental health, but what does it look like if there is mental health in the workplace? Well, I really want to stress that mental illnesses alone do not lead to poor work. If you think of that statistic, 70% of people with depression are in the workforce. If mental illnesses were creating problems, there wouldn't be a lot of work getting done, which there is. However, an untreated or undertreated mental illness can lead to symptoms that interfere with work, as we mentioned earlier. Also on that, depression is a leading cause of short and long-term disability. I always want to caution all of us, because it's not, you know, a little information is dangerous. We don't want to play doctor or therapist. So when I talk about these symptoms in the next slide or two, realize that these are life is bumpy. Anybody, all of us will be experiencing some of these at some point, but let's look about understanding mental illnesses. Mental illnesses disrupt a person's thinking, feeling, moods, ability to relate to others, and daily functioning. Treatable medical condition, like I said. Mental illnesses are like other physical health illnesses. The difference, though, is that mental illnesses are biological in nature. They affect the brain structure and chemistry. There's a multitude of things that can contribute to a mental illness, including genetics, environmental, meaning the environment that we live in, but also those that are experiencing climate change on the coasts can cause depression and anxiety, negative life experiences, historical trauma, and situational. If there's a trauma in the family, a death or some type of other trauma, that can cause some issues. Also important to note that less than 4% of violent crimes are due to mental illnesses, and they're not always portrayed that way. So there's 57 of us here. Let's just round that up to 60. 20% of individuals experience a mental illness. That's 1 in 5 adults. So 20% of us, that could be 12 of us on this webinar that could be experiencing a mental illness. Anxiety is the most common, followed by depression. Bipolar disorder and schizophrenia are considered serious mental illnesses, obviously less common. However, 1 in 25 is not that rare. Post-traumatic stress disorder is considered a mental illness as well as the eating disorders. I mentioned ADHD and borderline personality disorders. Mental illnesses can also be associated with other healthcare conditions such as diabetes, MS, and the trauma from cutting open the heart and heart surgery can lead to depression and anxiety in some folks. So very common. What's it look like? As I mentioned, I guarantee all of us have experienced 1 or more of these in the last month because it's rough times right now and life is bumpy. There's a lot going on. So I'd like you to consider 2 weeks as your benchmark in yourself, your loved ones, or your colleagues. But looking at overly emotional, bursting into tears, or short-fused and angry, having a hard time concentrating, can't remember things, you can't screen out that stimuli. Maybe your employees or yourselves, your patterns of tardiness or absences, don't have that stamina or pace. And remember, I talked about that scarcity. So we're all having a little bit of that with, and hopefully not everyone, and we are getting to spring and all the great time frame in summer. But if this is prolonged, decreased productivity, you can't power through, difficulty handling time pressures, or we're getting those real physical problems. And these are physical problems of a mental illness and that chronic stress, which can lead to mental illnesses, headaches, stomach aches, racing heart, back pain. Treatment options are similar to other healthcare options. There's medications, there's therapy. Nutrition is so incredibly important for our mental health. Remember, I talked about that 95% of our serotonin is produced in our gut. There's a direct gut to brain access. Physical activity, getting enough sleep, visiting with professionals. There's different types of therapy. There's intensive outpatient, there's partial hospitalization, there's rehab, and there's also complete hospitalization. So we've got that promoting it. We know what it looks like. So now we really need to work on changing our attitudes. We want to normalize it in the workplace. I think the silver lining with COVID is that it has raise the awareness of mental health, and it played out on the world stage with the Olympics. So we really need to continue that conversation and normalize it. 1 in 5 of us experience a mental illness. So common. Promote that self-care, making mental health a priority. Make caring for your mental health a priority. Realize, though, due to that stigma, and at NAMI we call it discrimination, because that may impact a person's decision to disclose to their supervisor because they're afraid it will affect their raises or promotions, or how will people look at me or them. So encourage access to treatment. If you have that EAP, post that information, and that will reduce the negative impact on the quality of work. Realize that mental illnesses may impact their ability to cope with a family member's mental illness, so that may affect their work, and accept mental illnesses like any other illness. So if you feel like it, well, actually, we don't have a lot of time. So I want you to think about slang words that come to mind when describing mental illnesses. So I'll just give you a second to think about that, or 5 seconds. So I'm sure some of these came to mind: crazy, nuts, insane, wacko. And we don't say crazy at NAMI. And I invite you to notice how much you will say crazy during the day. I mean, it's crazy how often you say crazy. It is part of our common vernacular. However, these are slang words to describe mental illnesses. And I shared earlier that it takes adults on average 11 years to get treatment. Barely 57% of people were getting treatment. So you can think about the fact that if we're viewed this way, we won't maybe get our help that we need. So these are just some light graphics that if someone's in bed and they have food poisoning, you most likely wouldn't say, well, I get that you have food poisoning and all, but you at least have to make an effort. And we tend to talk to people with a mental illness like that. It's in your head, snap out of it. You need to work harder. Well, lying in bed obviously isn't helping you. You need to try something else. Well, here's somebody that's, seriously ill. But we tend to talk about people living with a mental illness, as mentioned earlier, like this. So I want you to contrast that to someone that's recovering from heart surgery or a car accident or has broken their leg or cancer or is living with rheumatoid arthritis or some type of lifelong disease or, disease, physical condition. What do we think of them? Usually warrior, brave, strong, survivor. We really want to think of individuals with a mental illness that way. Because I guarantee they are as strong, if not stronger than others. It's sometimes called the invisible disability because we can't always see it. So a lot of people are bearing that pain by themselves. And when our son was first suicidal in 8th grade, I didn't tell anybody because I was so afraid of what people would think. So we don't tend to talk about this. And sometimes mental illnesses are called the no hot dish disease because we don't generally take food over and we don't send cards. So think about that and promoting that mental health and changing those attitudes and then making accommodations for individuals. There's many accommodations that can be made who are experiencing a mental illness. So think about those that you might do for someone else. If we have to build a ramp, or if we may have to make an accommodation if someone's on crutches, or maybe they're more fatigued from some medication they're taking. But we want to make sure that we involve the employee when we're developing them. So again, think about how you would accommodate for other illnesses with similar symptoms. Again, there's a handout on this one. So think about attendance. Is there flexible scheduling? Maybe there's a later starting time, modify break schedules. Make it comfortable and easy for people to leave for therapy appointments. We leave to go to doctor's appointments and dentist appointments. Therapy appointments are just as important. Maybe people can work from home, a lot easier to do nowadays, and consider flex space or part-time and job sharing. There's concentration issues. There's quite a few people at NAMI that have panels over their desk, and they look like those things that you put in your windows to block the sun in the summer in your car windows. But they're over to reduce their sound panels and to reduce the lights. Maybe white noise machines or earbuds, or get some organizers to reduce clutter. Increase your natural lighting. Get those full spectrum lightings. Seasonal affective disorder, right in front of me, is a mental illness that leads to depression. And all of us here, we've all heard this, I'm sure, in the Northern Hemisphere, with the shorter days can be affected by this. So provide those seasonal affective disorder lights if possible. That's that full spectrum lighting. Modify ways instructions and feedback are given. Maybe provide some written checklists or use color coding. And there's a lot of great apps for memory aids. There's a Toodle-Do, email applications, calendars with automatic reminders, just to help people stay on task, because distraction can be a problem for individuals living with a mental illness. So maybe we need some extra time to learn those tasks. If emotions are something that needs to be dealt with, encourage the use of stress management techniques. We have a great self-care and mindfulness class. There's a positive psychology class. These are great stress management techniques, and you can Google them also. And I'm sure mspWellness has some resources for you. If applicable or able to, have a support animal. Allow telephone calls for people to provide support. I always think about, I can't remember that name. It was that game with the block, the pyramid, and they could have their call person. It's really important to be able to connect to someone, and then refer to that EAP. If fatigue is an issue, think about flexible scheduling, goal-oriented workload, reducing that workplace stress. If there's ways that we can do that with different hours, as we talked about, that part-time flexibility, get outside. Apply for a micro grant for a work place for a rest period. We actually, NAMI got a grant, it was before I started, and it was a large supply room, and it's a quiet room now, and it's so wonderful. It's got some yoga mats. We are mostly hybrid, so the little water fountain isn't running, but there's a CD player in there. I work with an organization down in Egan. They have a gorgeous a quiet room. They also have another room where people can walk on a treadmill. So there's a lot of great resources that we can tie into our workplace wellness. There's a comment that not only for companies to survive, but thrive, we need to address the mental health issues of our colleagues. So think about coworker interactions. Encourage employees to walk away from frustrating situations, provide opportunities for privacy, which can be hard if we're all in cubicles. So maybe there's a little office that can be needed, that can be used if people need to speak privately together. Provide mental illness awareness training. You're attending this, continue on with that. We also do a multitude of public presentations every month on our website, so you can check those out. They're free. Meet regularly. Make sure that you're taking time to check in with people. If it's a family member, treat it like any other illness. Again, mental illnesses are the same as physical illnesses. They can affect how we work and how we function. And especially if someone at home is struggling, think how distracted we are. So realize we may need time off to take a loved one to treatment. Again, keep saying EAP. It's such an incredible resource. And then our classes, if you go to NAMIMN.org, we have a list of wonderful classes that, as I mentioned, that are free to the public, but they're also broken up. There's parents, classes for individuals living with a mental illness, parents of kids with a mental illness, family members of those living with a mental illness. And that's the same for our support groups also. They're a great free resource for you. So let's talk about fostering respect. We are doing great on time. Okay, so as a supervisor, what can you do? Well, we talked about developing that culture that promotes well-being. If we promote mental health and start with ourselves, we lead by example, but promote that as well. Accept and treat mental illnesses as any other, but then communicate the commitment to do this. I was looking at your wellness champion, and here's a great spot to plug this. On June 15th, we are having a special employer event. You can go to our website. It's I think it's the second banner up on the top, NAMIMN.org, but it's an open book downtown Minneapolis. And what I am having is 3 of what I call my model employees come in and share lessons learned, what worked, what didn't, talk about the next normal. But we really want to communicate our commitment to this. We want to walk the walk and talk the talk. So what can you do? This one organization, I love this. They started an employee newsletter. And at first there weren't a lot of people that shared their stories, but then when it got published, and it's published quarterly, and it kept coming out, people realized that we've normalized, this is accepted, and their newsletter is big every month. And what that does is it also helps people feel not so alone. So it's a wonderful tool to do something like that. Have a panel where you have HR or people, maybe you identify someone that wants to speak and share their story, that they talk about that, and then there's Q&A. Put out information. You will have those resources, handouts after, post those. Promote that work-life harmony and stress reduction. It's important, again, as I mentioned, we can't really do this if people don't have the education and the resources to promote mental health. So encourage people to seek out, promote that information, educate people, and then speak up about misinformation and poor language. I talked about that a little bit with those crazy nuts wacko. We'll get into detail a little bit more. And then provide those educational screenings. You can do free depression screenings, offer online cognitive behavioral therapy. And then understand your health plan. There's a law called parity, and mental illnesses are required by law to be covered the same way as physical illnesses. And that's not always the case. So make sure that your insurance is covering. Can people get emergency appointments? What's your formulary? Prior authorization. Can people get into residential treatment? Do you have crisis services available? And then ask for feedback. Again, this little quiz can be a helpful tool that you can see, hey, where are we? And you could send that out to all your managers. Just what's going on? Where are there holes in what we're providing? Include mental health and overall wellness work. I keep talking about EAP. Measure how those benefits are being used. Really important to respect confidentiality. Ask what that employee wants others to know. If someone has come to you with a mental health emergency or illness and they need to take some time off, respect their privacy, and how does that want to be discussed with others. Learn about mental health and mental illnesses. Our website is great. We have fact sheets. We have a health library where you can do deeper dives on some mental illnesses. Learn how to identify emotional stress and distress and how to respond. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we're not asking y'all to be mental health providers or play doctor or therapist. All of us at NAMI are educators, I imagine. Many of us are not mental health providers on this call. However, just like we wouldn't walk past someone that we cared about in distress, we can notice that in our teams and our colleagues. So just be aware of that. And I want to point out also, if we're thinking about, we talked about all those symptoms, if performance is an issue, we want to focus on the behaviors. We don't want to say, hey, you look depressed. Is that why your reports are late? We want to focus on, wow, I see you've been tardy or absent, or your reports aren't on time, or you haven't been showing up. Is something going on? So focus on that behavior that you're seeing, the issue at hand, not the symptoms, or not the symptoms. So arm yourself with information. What does sharing concerns look like? Well, I've noticed that maybe your camera hasn't been on in meetings, or you haven't been checking in regularly. Is something going on? Just reach out to people. We all want to know that people care for us, and it's wonderful. Even if nothing's going on, it's just like, wow, thanks for thinking of me. So offer support. How can I best support you right now, today? We don't want to problem solve for people. We just, how can I support you? Check in regularly and avoid those judgments of that toughen up or snap out of it. I guarantee they would if they could. That one graphic where the individual's in bed with the food poisoning. And I remember when our son was in high school, I would be standing over him, you have to get up. And he literally could not get out of bed. So as a coworker, arm yourself with facts, listen non-judgmentally, demonstrate support in little ways. If you know someone's having a hard time, just like if someone's on crutches, pick up their mail for them, invite them to maybe coffee on Zoom, just support in little ways. Can I grab something for you? Don't make assumptions about someone's mental health. Life is bumpy. We don't know what's going on. Maybe they've just had really bad sleep for the last few days and that's what's showing up. So don't make those assumptions. Promote the commitment to staff well-being and include our friends and coworkers in our plans. And I would encourage all of you to just check out that Surgeon General article on isolation, because it has affected the entire world, but this is basically the US, what they're talking about. So I did want to go back, and I thought the slide was in here just about, hold on one second, about as a coworker and just people first language and active listening, we'll talk about in a second, but people first language is when speaking up about misinformation. So if you hear somebody going, man, they must be depressed, they're acting so crazy. What we really want to say, we want to speak up about that and say, hey, maybe we don't want to say that. Perhaps they're having a bad day. Is there something we can do? Reach in. But also people first language is called someone living with a mental illness, someone living with schizophrenia, not they're schizophrenic. Even the same with addiction, someone living with addiction, not they're an addict. Because we don't say that someone is their heart disease or their cancer or something. They're someone living with other diseases. So mental health, same as a physical health condition. So we have a whole class on difficult interactions, and I've been teaching the most of that this year. So I'm going to talk about that for a moment. Oh, awesome. Francis threw in that Surgeon General's report. I appreciate that. So we at NAMI did a whole class. We're working with an organization on DEI, and we did some information on conflict resolution and what the Northwestern University leadership class, their individuals, the professors there, talk about conflict transformation versus resolution. In resolution, there's usually someone that wins. In transformation, it allows us to see the bigger picture, maybe problem solve more. So when we're in a difficult interaction, try to remember why you're in conversation. What is your shared goal? Very basic example. You need new office chairs. Someone wants red, someone wants blue. You can't agree, but think about that shared goal. You need new office furniture. Are you perceiving the same thing differently? Again, we all come with different biases and experiences to the conversation. Another basic thing, If you're looking at a cloud and someone's seeing a shape of a rabbit and someone's seeing the shape of a duck, we're still both looking at the cloud. So try to think about that when you're in conversation. What is this about? Slow down and ask questions. You may have heard that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we're supposed to use those in the proper ratio. That means actively listening. Active listening means listening and waiting until the person gets done before we start formulating our response. Because what happens, and I'm guilty of this because I'm always going fast, I start thinking about what I'm going to say to people. It can cause us to jump to conclusions and miss important information, as well as not giving us time between that stimulus and that response. So slow down, just wait until the person's done talking, take a deep breath, and then respond. And then think about your style of communication. As you can imagine, I'm an extrovert. So when I'm talking to people, and I've been better at this just from teaching this and being aware of my style of communication, but when I'm talking to someone who's an introvert, I sometimes think they're not listening to me, they don't like me, they're not appreciating what I'm saying. But that's not true. They're just introverted, they're a little more quiet, and they're formulating their ideas. That also plays into the active listening. Also, extroverts can bulldoze introverts, so just be aware of style of communication. And think about that transformation versus resolution. We build relationships more, we build trust. Be curious, caring, and interested. Help whoever you're communicating with feel safe. Validate people's feelings. Use I statements. What I heard you say, or instead of you said this. That opens up the door for a calmer interaction and doesn't put the other person on the defense. And be respectful. A sign of a well-managed conflict is maintaining our self-worth. Future work is not compromised and may improve. We maintain trust and there's increased clarity. Again, if we're perceiving the same thing differently, when we work through this, there's increased clarity. So to recap what you can do, develop a routine, especially for sleep. As I mentioned earlier, that's incredibly important. We have something in our brains called a glymphatic system. And what it does is it flushes out toxins overnight and it replenishes our cells. That's why we feel so great when we've had a good night's sleep. So again, if it's 5 hours or less for a 2-week time frame, you really want to check on your sleep hygiene. Don't forget about moving your body. Stay organized. That helps reduce stress. Make time for yourself, utilize resources, and don't want to, promote anybody leaving their job. However, if you are in a toxic work environment, and this is a good time to just say that I'm retiring, and one of the people that we were interviewing, and we have a new person starting June 1st, so it's going to be awesome. She's really great. But one person that we were interviewing had left their job due to a toxic work environment. So we don't want to put ourselves in those situations because that chronic stress impacts our mental health as well as our physical health. However, understand that nothing is perfect. You may remember last year was the Great Resignation, and then I had read an article because there was a backlash on it because people moved to the new job and the coffee was just as bad. So just be aware of all of that and then seek help. Don't be afraid to call your EAP. This QR code will take you to some excellent resources. The first one is all resources for communities of color, really incredible resources. There's inclusive therapists, Black mental wellness, non-binary network. We have NAMI wellness and color podcasts, some really additional great resources. Just a couple of comments on suicide prevention. And please feel safe when I talk about this because suicide can be triggering and it's hard to talk about. So close your eyes or step away if you need to. And okay, I'm going to hold that until the end. That's a great question. So thank you. So we have a class called Question, Persuade, Refer. It's called QPR. It's just like CPR for suicide prevention. It's promoted twice a month or presented twice a month for free on our website. More this month, although we're getting toward the end of the month. And then also September is Suicide Prevention Month. It's there more. But what it does is it gives all of us tools to save a life. It's a national program. There's just a few people at NAMI or a handful of at NAMI that are trained for it, but it's recommended everyone over 16 take the class. But some warning signs that you want to be aware of are suicide threats, preoccupation with death, hope for the future, self-loathing, maybe social isolation more than normal, alcohol or drug abuse, prolonged depression, making final arrangements or giving away possessions. And what we can do, again, this is like the CPR for suicide prevention, is we can express empathy and offer hope. We can just be there for that person. That sounds really hard. I would feel so sad if I were in your situation too. Let me be with you and offer hope. You can ask, are you feeling suicidal? Do you want to kill yourself? That does not increase the risk. We don't want to say, do you want to hurt yourself? Because hurt has different definitions. Listen non-judgmentally. That means just listen to them. I'm sorry, that sounds really hard. Not, wow, you have so much to live for, because in their minds, life has become too difficult. So don't try to do it all yourself. Get a mental health professional involved. Don't promise secrecy. Don't worry about being disloyal. And if persuasion fails, call a hotline or emergency services. So here are the crisis numbers. There's also a new crisis resource handout that you will get, but 988 came out last July. That is the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. If you find yourself in a situation where you need some help, call 988. If you need help or someone that you are with needs help, you can call or text it also. You can, there's a crisis text line. You can text home to 741 741. You can actually do any 2-state abbreviation. That's a national thing that will get you in with someone. You can call your local county crisis number. Every county in Minnesota has a mobile crisis team. But if there's immediate danger or harm, or there's a weapon involved, call 911. You want to say this is a mental health emergency, so a mental health crisis team can be dispatched so responders know what to expect. You can ask for a mobile crisis team or a crisis intervention trained officer, but sometimes that's hard to remember in times of stress. So you'll have that handout. We recommend that everybody take a picture of this and put it in your phone under suicide. And then we will wrap up here. So we have time for Q&A. We talked about promoting that mental health. We talked about common symptoms, changing our attitudes. We talked about accommodations, and then creating places that foster respect and acceptance. We do lots of wonderful things. I mentioned our classes and our support groups. We have booklets, we do suicide prevention. We have our walk September 23rd. I encourage whatever organization you're with, form a team and come out and support. It's a great fundraiser, but it also helps normalize the conversation in the workplace. You can consider employee giving. At NAMI, we like to talk about compassion. None of us are at our best in times of stress. So think the best of people. Give people grace and space, and importantly, give yourself grace and space. Look at that, 10:55. All right, so we're going to go to Q&A. If anybody has any confidential or just after this webinar, please feel free to reach out to me. I have the longest name, email, and title. I am retiring May 31st, but that email address will connect to the person that starts on June 1st. So it will be a seamless transition, which I'm pretty excited about. So I'm going to take a sip and I'm going to look at the chat and the Q&A. So I'll leave this information up. So someone asked, oh, yep, that was that one. Oops, excuse me. Moved over. So great question. So you're welcome for the valuable information. They would like to incorporate additional team training to help promote awareness and well-being best practices for their organization with respect to privacy and confidentiality. What are some best well-being communication statements we can provide if others are questioning coworkers' absences or accommodations? Would it also be beneficial to have team trainings? Yes, to understand and appreciate individualities and work better together. So you're welcome. I love that you are considering incorporating the well-being practices. And so the best thing to do is, with respect to privacy and confidentiality, and I'm not trying to pass this off, but the first thing is to talk to HR and see what your policies and procedures are, because there might be actually organizational policies. And the reason I bring that up is because one organization said we have specific steps to be taken for HR. If someone is out with accommodations or absences, we can just say, they're out due to, what do we want to say? We can say sick time, or we can just say they're taking some time off. I think that just for privacy and confidentiality, you probably don't have to say more than that. However, if people were noticing things, we also don't want to leave the door open to speculation. So, oh, I'm hoping somebody can everybody hear me? Yeah. Okay, sorry, I was answering this live. I haven't seen this set up before. So, and yes, I think team trainings are incredibly important. We just did some with an organization that it's like Strength Trainers or Myers-Briggs, but this was on identifying what earth element you were. And for me, being an extrovert and I'm a doer, it really helped me with one team member who I looked at them in a different way, realizing that that's what was going on. So, in your handout, there's some resources that you can use also for accommodations and confidentiality. And I would reach out to your HR or your EAP on how they would like that handled. And I'm sure that wasn't a great answer. Sorry.
It was a great answer. Thank you.
And
thanks for the question.
That was the one. Okay, good. That was the last one. Okay, cool. But yeah, the more we can just talk about it, we can start by talking about it ourselves. Man, this has been a hard week. I realize, because you can do that blue red day and you can start meetings like that also. That helps normalize the conversation. Hey, how was your morning? You having a blue day or a red day? You know, that helps us just think about that we all have mental health, and sometimes things are worse than others based on what's going on in our lives, or maybe we're just sick. I mean, COVID still, our older son just went to Austin with his friends for their bachelor celebration, and he came back with COVID. So it's still going around. So there's a lot of absences that we don't necessarily need to identify why. But I would encourage people to just say, hey, they're just having a rough time right now. Maybe you want to send a card. Because again, I talked about it being the no hot dish disease. We don't always talk about it. So any way we can normalize it, check out these resources. See where you are in your workplace. Work with your MSP Wellness team with all the great resources they have. Google well-being strategies. I'm going to send my newsletter to Francis, and you can sign up for my newsletter also, because there's also an article in there about what do I do if an employee tells me they have a mental illness. So there's some great tips in the employee newsletter that you can get all of our newsletters at NAMIMN.org. But I always have articles in there about what's going on, noteworthy articles. So
Love that. Thank you for that. I'll pass that along in my follow-up email. Catherine, thank you so much. That was wonderful. I really just appreciate your deep knowledge and expertise.
The chat or the eval in the chat.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Amy's going to go ahead and put that evaluation. Please take just a couple of moments to fill that out for NAMI and for Catherine.
Let's forget to do that. So, and maybe we can send it out with the handouts also for those that jumped off already. So,
okay, great.
Great. Thank you. Well, thank you all. Please let me know if you have any follow-up questions, and have a great rest of the spring and have an awesome summer.
Thanks everyone for being here. I'll follow up with those handouts Catherine mentioned. They're really got some great tools in there. So thanks everyone.
Okay, great. Thanks. Take care.